Hi, everybody. It's August 31st, 2026, and I've been posting these videos as a form of therapy in my recovery from the trauma of watching my little brother, Paul Cairns, 64 with Down syndrome, be locked away by the British Columbia New Democratic Party government, David Eby as leader, Nikki Sharma as Attorney General, and Sheila Malcolmson as the cabinet minister responsible for Paul's care. So in these videos, I cover two topics. The first is my experience of watching my brother be locked away and then killed by the British Columbia government. Then the second is my understanding of the medical assistance in dying, or the euthanasia issue in Canada. I believe that my brother was euthanized at the direction of the person that the government appointed as his guardian, my then 82-year-old Catholic nun sister from 4,000 kilometers away in Ontario. And in every video, I try and touch upon a different issue of euthanasia in Canada. But I just want to say at the beginning, at the outset, that as of Canada Day 2026, the Government of Canada executed extrajudicially by lethal injection 103,000 Canadian citizens as medical care. And in 2025, under Prime Minister Mark Carney, Canada euthanized or executed by extrajudicially by lethal injection 17,772 Canadian citizens. 96% of those people that the government killed were of European descent or white and Canadian-born citizens and disabled or ill. So it's the extermination or the genocide of an identifiable group. By way of background, I started out as a psychologist for the government of British Columbia, working with mentally handicapped adults in a large institution. And when I recognized the need for those people to have legal representation, I went to law school. I graduated as the first single mother in history to graduate from law school in British Columbia. It was very difficult. And then I was a federal prosecutor for several years, prosecuting federal offenses. So what I know what it feels like to take someone's liberty away. And actually, I was in a position to ask for the death penalty as a federal prosecutor before 1999, when it was abolished for the final group of people, which was the military. Then I was taught family law by the current leader of the opposition in British Columbia, Carrie Lynn Finley, and I went out on my own, and I practiced law for 23 years before I became disabled in an accident in 2008, and I retired as a lawyer in 2016. So the government locked Paul away. And please bear with me because it takes a while to explain. And I feel like to do justice to my little brother, I have to explain what happened to him first before I go into the more general issue of euthanasia in Canada. So Paul was locked away when the government discovered that I had complained. I discovered that they had created a secret and what I alleged to be a fraudulent and forged power of attorney, granting all of his human rights to my then 82-year-old Catholic nun sister, 4,000 kilometers away, literally 4,000 kilometers away in Ontario. They forged this document to give him the COVID-19 shot on February 6th of 2021, but I didn't find out about it for about a year. And I didn't complain about it. I complained to the Burnaby RCMP police when I finally had it produced to me because I could see it was a forgery. And I knew that it was a forgery because I taught my little brother Paul with Down syndrome to print the word Paul, the only word that he could ever read or print. It took me about a year as a little girl, laboriously teaching him P and then A and then U and then L. And he always had like lots of errors, upside down letters or repeated letters. It was always a total mishmash, but he was very proud of it. But the Paul on this forged document was very accurate, more than what he was capable of doing. What I believe they did was they had one of their workers hold his hand and sign for him to make him look more intellectually capable than he was, because he was not capable of appointing, even though you could be pretty low functioning and appoint a representative. He was too low functioning. He never functioned above the level of a 15-month-old. So I complained to the Burnaby RCMP, and then almost immediately I got a letter from the nun's lawyer in Ottawa saying that my visits with Paul, I had a written agreement with the government of British Columbia. I could visit Paul twice, on Friday afternoons and on Saturday. He could come to my home, and I took him out. I've taken him to Newfoundland twice. I've taken him to Seattle. We used to go to the Pacific National Exhibition every year. We went on outings almost every visit. We went and saw the movie Elvis, and I would cook for him. It was really an exciting time. He's my last surviving family member in Greater Vancouver from a big family of 6 adult children and my parents. So when the government found out, I went to the Burnaby RCMP and I complained. And the constable that I spoke to said that she would get a search warrant for the original document with the forged signature. She didn't do that. What she did instead was she went right to the group home and tipped them off that I had complained. And that's when I got a letter from my sisters. My sister had 2 law firms working for her, one in Vancouver and one in Ottawa, a lawyer named Charles Gibson, who really his only practice consists of pedophile priests and nuns, except for my sister. So I got an email from the group home's lawyer saying I would never see my brother again. He was 64 at that time and I was 66. Can you imagine getting a letter like that from someone, from another human being? So I did everything I could think of. I was, as I said, I was trained as a lawyer, but I retired in 2016. I went to the Supreme Court of British Columbia to restore Paul's visits or to be appointed his guardian. I was not successful. I appealed that right to the Supreme Court of Canada. I wasn't even given permission to appeal at the Supreme Court of Canada. And so they withheld Paul's in-person visits. Finally, they relented, and I was allowed a 10-minute telephone call once a week on Friday afternoon. I haven't got the heart to take the alarm off my smartphone. It still rings when I'm supposed to call him. And I would record every visit, every telephone visit. He begged me to visit him. He didn't understand why I wasn't visiting him. He said he would do vacuuming for me. He thought it was something he was doing wrong. Can you imagine? He was locked up as much as any prisoner has ever been locked away, because I was his last surviving family member and visitor in Greater Vancouver. And then on April 15th of 2024, I got an email from my sister's Vancouver law firm. Her Vancouver lawyer was Casey Deanshaw, a young shyster, creep, cruel and callous, evil lawyer. Never used. He was initially with the firm Singleton Urquhart, and then I guess they fired him, and he went to the firm Borden Ladner Gervais, which is, I think, the biggest Canadian law firm. They've got a big office, a big fancy office downtown. Evil little man. Anyways, I got an email from him saying Paul had had a stroke and I could arrange a visit through him. So I dropped everything, took a cab to Burnaby Hospital, and Burnaby Hospital staff allowed me to visit him for 10 minutes. And he grabbed my hand and squeezed it so tight. At that point, we hadn't seen each other for 588 days. When I said my name, I said, "Paul, it's Kathleen." And he squeezed my hand so tight. Then when the nun could see that he wasn't going to die, she flew in from Ontario and put him in a room where it was only her and him. And he was struggling so hard to recover. I could see that he knew she wanted him to die, because he had cost them a lot of money, and she had, I'm sure she was in trouble with her congregation or her convent for spending so much money. I estimate the Catholic Church spent over $2 million just to uphold this fraudulent forged power of attorney she had over him. And he was, I don't know if I can convey it, but I could see he was trying to act really normal. Like usually Paul is sort of a happy-go-lucky kind of jolly guy, but he knew this was, he was facing life and death, that she wanted to kill him. And he tried to look so normal and healthy. And he grabbed a book from my hand and turned the pages perfectly and scanned the pictures perfectly. He responded appropriately. He had an oxygen mask, a ventilator with an oxygen mask, and intravenous, and, normal medical supports. But he tried so hard to look normal. That's what I could see. He was struggling to not look mentally handicapped, to look like a normal person, because he knew it was a matter of life and death and that she was going to kill him. And then I got a phone call. Well, I was only allowed to visit him for 10 minutes per day, but I waited in the hallway at the hospital for 10 to 12 hours a day. And on April 21st, I got a phone call from the Burnaby RCMP, a staff sergeant, and he said they had been ordered by their Ottawa oversight agency to reopen the investigation into the fraudulent and forged power of attorney. And I was so excited. I thought, oh, finally, somebody's listening. I was just shocked. It was like a bolt out of the blue. And I went to court the next morning and I asked the judge who had conduct of the case to suspend the judge's authority over Paul, because I had this new information that the RCMP were investigating her fraudulent and forged power of attorney. But we didn't get on. I didn't get the court order. And when I got back to the hospital, when I walked into Paul's room, the nun met me at the door, and she wouldn't look me in the eye. So never trust anybody if they won't look you in the eye. But she said through gritted teeth, "Say goodbye to Paul, he's dying." And I walked over to the bed, and all his medical supports had been stripped away, his ventilator, his oxygen mask, and he appeared to me to be dead, and I've seen dead people before. He was perfectly still, and his hand was cool to the touch. His eyes were wide open, and his pupils were dilated and fixed. I could see he was dead. And I believe that she had ordered his doctor, his treating doctor, Michael Baker, to sedate him to death. He didn't need to be sedated. I asked them not to sedate him so much. He was struggling to recover from a stroke. He wasn't in any pain at all. He didn't need any sedation. But I believe that she had ordered the doctor to kill him. But in any event, all his medical supports, his oxygen mask had been removed. All of the medicals, I can't remember if his intravenous was removed or not, but he was perfectly still, and she wouldn't let me near his head. The other thing was, I should mention, was that he had a wound on his head that was about 2 centimeters in length that was oozing blood. So he might have been hit at this group home, or he might have had a fall. It might not have been a stroke at all. But I knew that once she knew that I knew she had already been told. She knew she was under investigation, but she thought I didn't know. And once she found out that I had been contacted by the RCMP, Paul had to die, because she thought if he's dead, the RCMP will not be able to proceed with their investigation into the fraudulent and forged power of attorney. And she was right, because I never heard from them again. I wrote them an email, asked them to treat Paul's death as suspicious. That was as strongly as I could put it. I never heard, I was never interviewed. Normally, if you say something like that, they want to interview you. I was never asked to come in. I told them they could come to my apartment. They never came. At that time, they never came. They never interviewed me. They appointed somebody to look into it. The coroner said, because the medical doctor, Michael Baker, had signed off on the death, it was final. There was nothing that could be done. And then after Paul died, actually just before he had died, but once they had learned they were being investigated for the fraudulent and forged power of attorney, they brought an application against me. So they take and strip Paul of every right a human being can have in Canada. And then once he was dead, then they went after me to have me designated permanently, what's a very rare designation in Canada that suspends all of your access to the Canadian courts and the judicial system. They had brought an application, have me designated permanently a vexatious litigant. And of course, this meant my sister flew in from Ontario again, and there was a 4-day hearing. None of my materials were before the court as required by law. And of course, at the end of the hearing, the judge, Madam Justice Judith E. Hoffman, designated me permanently a vexatious litigant. And I appealed that decision to the Court of Appeal of British Columbia. Wasn't successful. I applied for leave to appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada. They didn't even give me leave to appeal. I wasn't even given permission to appeal that designation. So you could sue me and I couldn't respond without permission of a judge. I can't file any document in court. So this is after being a federal prosecutor and practicing law relatively successfully and winning some pretty big cases for 23 years. I'm designated, and only thing short of euthanizing me that they could do. And believe me, if they could euthanize me, they would. I've already had a heart attack. I have lupus. I've got kidney failure. I'm white, a white senior citizen. I'm precisely the demographic of human being the Canadian government likes to euthanize. Even before all these issues arose with Paul, I noticed that the law on euthanasia had changed in Canada. And I started posting these little videos about it. I couldn't understand what the hell was going on. When you're a prosecutor and you know what it takes to suspend somebody's rights and put them in prison, you're very sensitive to that authority. And you take it very, very seriously. But it just seemed like it was a free-for-all. I couldn't understand what the hell was going on. They were killing all these people in Canada. I mean, medical doctors, extrajudicially. They didn't need to get a court order or anything. And they could kill people, execute them extrajudicially by lethal injection. In all of 2025, the United States only executed convicted criminals. 43 in all of the United States were executed by lethal injection in the United States. And in that time, in 2025, Mark Carney presided over a government that executed 17,772 Canadian citizens. Canada killed 45 people today, extrajudicially by lethal injection. All that it takes is a signature of any old doctor, any old nurse on a piece of paper. It's not even a sworn document. Most of my career involved getting people divorced and to get people divorced, you need you have to go before the materials have to go before a judge. The judge has to sign off on them. And 50% of the applications for divorce are rejected as being irregular in some way, or the judge wants more information. But Canada kills people, vulnerable people, and they say, well, they asked for it, but they don't. They don't. In many cases, they don't ask for it. In last year, at Vancouver General Hospital, a woman named Miriam Lancaster, who was 84 years old, went into Vancouver General Emergency because she had a sore back. And the young female doctor approached her without asking her one question about her condition and said, "We've decided to offer you MAiD." So what I wanted to talk about today, and bear with me, because I have to think these things through. I have conversations every day with Copilot and Chat GPT, and they criticize my arguments, but I run my arguments up against artificial intelligence. But one of the issues that I find people are very sensitive, all of the opposition, the Conservative Party of British Columbia and of Canada, has not made a peep against euthanasia, which is the single most serious issue in Canadian history, because we have an 800-year-long, the British Commonwealth has an 800-year-long history of common law from the Magna Carta in 1215, protecting people from the power of the state and of the king. But one of the issues that I find, the reason that political parties and almost everyone is afraid to talk about the issue with euthanasia is because they think it might threaten women's abortion rights that are hard fought. They think, well, it's an issue of choice. And so if a woman can choose to abort a fetus, then why should she not be able to ask to be killed and to be executed extrajudicially by lethal injection? And here's my response to that is you have to make a distinction, because there's been a distinction in law and in society from 120 years before the modern era. So in Roman times, a person was defined as a baby that took its first breath after being born. That's what a person is, with a legal entity of being a person. And in general, the state's role is to protect the interests of persons. And when I experienced myself that when I was pregnant with my son and I went into childbirth, I ran into I had to have a cesarean. I was unable to give birth, and I overheard my doctor thought that she thought I was out, but I could hear what she said. And she said to another medical staff, 40 years ago, this would have been a case of mother and child dead. So I was in labor for 24 hours and I didn't dilate at all. And I had to have an emergency cesarean. My own grandmother basically died from childbed fever after having her 7th child. She never came out of the hospital after having her 7th child. She contracted childbed fever. So pregnancy is a threat. It is a real threat, and it's becoming more so as women have babies later and later in life. Yet that maternal mortality is a real thing. And when faced with the issue of asking one human being to be a life support system for another human being and put their life at risk, the state, like the United States and in most Western civilization, made the decision that once it became safe for the mother to have abortions, that abortions became legal, because you're pitting the rights the right to life of a person against that of something or someone not yet a person. So that's the distinction. So I'm reassuring you, I'm trying to reassure you that you don't need to act like you're against pro-choice or women's rights or women's right to choose if you say that euthanasia is stepping over the line, because it's literally is stepping over the line. It's not watching somebody jump off a bridge. It is pushing that person off. Euthanasia is pushing that person off the bridge, using all the power and authority and motivation of the state to minimize costs and to favor one group over another. And the group that's been identified in the case of euthanasia in Canada is white people of European descent who are born in Canada and who are ill or disabled and may not be contributing monetarily to society. That's a genocide. When the state actively acts to eliminate one group, identify and eliminate one group, and that's the group that's been identified. And as far as people choosing to die, the right to choose inevitably becomes the duty to die. You can look at, there are many ways of alleviating pain. People are afraid of pain. They're afraid of being alone. When I keep thinking to Neanderthals, if killing people was a medical procedure, why didn't Neanderthals do it? They were experts at killing things. They could kill woolly mammoths. They could kill anyone or anything painlessly and quickly, but they didn't do it. And no healthy society in the history of humankind has ever been able to do it. And the ones that do end up destroying themselves, like the Mayan. I was at Chichen Itza, the pyramid, the Mayan pyramid in the Yucatan Peninsula in 2004, and I used to be able to climb the pyramid to the top, and I was at the place, at the spot where they sacrificed human beings to try and make the crop stronger as a sacrifice to the gods. And very, very few, even the worst societies, kill their own ill and disabled. They could do it, but the people that they kill are the people that pose a threat to others. So what I'm saying to you is, if you think that you've got to tippy-toe around the issue of euthanasia because it's a pro-choice issue, you're not threatening. Abortion is a completely different issue. And euthanasia is where the state steps in and actively kills human persons who are part of society, sentient human beings who are not dependent on anyone to survive. A human fetus is dependent on the mother to survive. But these people that are being killed aren't dependent on anyone, and it undermines the fabric of our society. So that's all. I wish I was more eloquent, but that's the best I can do for now. Please speak up and never say MAiD. You can start by never using their made-up propaganda, Soviet-style or Nazi-style propaganda word, medical assistance in dying. It's not medical. The word medical is from the Greek verb to heal, and you don't heal anyone by administering a lethal injection. So that's it for now. Bear with me, and I'm in the middle of my 10,000 steps. I'm very motivated to get my 10,000 steps in today because I've been doing it every day for 2 years, and today will be the 2-year mark. So for the last 2 days, I put on nice blouses. I got 2 nice blouses from Value Village, and I thought I want to look all nice and lawyery, but I just couldn't do it. So here I am in my walking gear, So never say MAiD. Never use start. You can stand up to the man and start by never using their made-up propaganda word. Never say MAiD. And let's recriminalize euthanasia in Canada. I love you all. Take care.